Hello and welcome to today's video. Today is another henna video and I am going to tell you 7 ways that you can henna your sister locks and save your sister locks while hennaing them. Let's find out. Welcome back to the video, and before I start I just wanted to say thank you ever so much to all of my new subscribers. It's really great to see those numbers going up, so thank you, and if you're new here you're welcome, and welcome to returning visitors and subscribers. So let me get into it, but before I do I just wanted to answer a few questions I've had about the video, about the henna. And the first question is from N Secret Loveth, and she wanted to know, do you henna dry unwashed hair? That's a really good question. And the answer is yes, I always put henna on dry hair and unwashed hair because I always put the henna on as close to wash day as possible. So yes, the short answer is yes to hennaing dry hair, yes to hennaing unwashed hair. And the reason for that is because you want to minimise the amount of washing that you're doing, because you could get slippage, and so it wouldn't make sense to wash your hair first and then apply henna, because once you put the henna on there is a lot of rinsing that has to happen at the end of the process. So that's the first question. The second question I have is from Tasha Curtis, and she asks me, will henna dry your hair out like regular dye? So will it dry out like regular dye? The answer is, I suppose it depends on the dye, but henna can be a little bit drying, and so in the henna mixture I'll always add a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, and so I think if you do that, that will save drying out your locks fully, and it's so that's good practice. When it comes to artificial dye, difficult to compare because, as I say, it depends on what's in that dye, but certainly if you use a bit of extra virgin olive oil in your henna mixture, that will save on the drying aspect. And if you check out the playlist, I've got a couple of henna videos there, including the full henna video, which includes all the different steps, step by step, and all of the implements that you'll need. And the third and last question is from Lovely Lock Bivens, and Lovely Lock Bivens asks, can I use henna on sister locks that are 4 months old? That's a really good question. I think you just have to use your best judgment with that, because if you have a lot of slippage that's happening and your locks are that young, then I would approach it with caution, simply because when you apply henna you have to rinse out a hell of a lot, and if you've already got slippage then that's not great news. But if your locks are fine, check that out with your sister lock consultant as well, then go ahead and apply the henna to your sister locks. I hennaed my sister locks when they were 5 months old and they were fine, but I just double check and just use your best judgment if you have slippage. So thanks for those questions. Let's get on to the video. So on to the 7 tips that will save your sister locks when you apply henna. The first tip is to get the henna consistency right. Now when you mix, henna comes as a powder, and when you need to mix it with water and with a little bit of oil. If you have a look at the playlist, and that will go into more details. But when you mix it, it needs to be a batter-like consistency. So that just means that it's neither too thick nor too thin. If the consistency is too thin, as in too runny, when you then apply it and wrap your head with the cling film or saran wrap, it will be very runny and it will run down the sides. That's happened to me before. It will just find a way. Thin, runny liquids will find a way to run down the sides, run down the back, or into your ears, and you really do want to avoid that. The other thing is that if the mixture is too thin, the heat from your head will also help to make that mixture a little bit more runny than it already is. So just to avoid that as much as possible. Equally, on the other side of things, if the batter is too thick, then it's going to be really difficult to spread it. So you just need to play around with it, but you'll find that point with enough experience of using it where you'll see that it's just right for spreading and not so thin that it's just going everywhere when you're using it, because henna is very messy and you just want to not make it more difficult than it needs to be. So get that consistency right, and also as part of mixing, just make sure you crush all of the powder bits, because sometimes it comes up a little bit lumpy. So that's the first point, get the consistency right. The second step to remember when applying henna to your Sisterlocks is to be as generous as you possibly can with the mixture. That's right, slap it on. In fact, if you mix too much, that's much better than having too little. Firstly, there's the preparation time with henna. Once you've mixed it, it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 hours and up to 24 hours for it to process, and that means the Lawson dye releasing into the mixture so that when you apply it to your hair, that will take onto your hair. So because of that long process, you don't want to be in a situation where you haven't mixed enough and you're just at that last patch, or you're in the middle or the front and you haven't got enough. So mix enough, but layer it on thickly. And the reason for that is that you don't want to miss any parts of your hair. The last thing you want to do is to put it all over and then to realise that you've missed a clump somewhere. So mix enough, mix more than enough, slap it on thickly so that you've got full coverage all over the sections that you want to cover. And that's the second tip that I would share with you. Okay, right, the third tip I would share with you is that you may need to sieve your henna. Now, henna comes in a couple of different variations of powder. You could save yourself the trouble by buying body art quality henna, and that already comes as a very fine powder, which is great, and you can use that without fear. Or you may have fine henna. Now, the brand that I use, it's pure, it's certified organic, and it is already fine, although I have also bought some body art quality, and I'm going to try that and I'll let you know the results in a future video. But if you're not sure, it's best to sieve your henna. Henna is made out of the twigs and branches of the henna plant, twigs and leaves, even branches, so the twigs and leaves of the henna plant. And it is possible that in some types of henna powder there will be some elements of either the twigs or the leaves within the mixture, and these will be a nightmare to wash out of your Sisterlocks. So to be on the safe side, if the henna that you're using isn't fine and pure, sieve the mixture first before you apply it to your Sisterlocks. And that's the third tip. Right, the fourth tip I will share with you today when applying henna to save your Sisterlocks would be to avoid black henna like the plague. Henna will come in a greenish colour, and natural henna will dye your hair a reddish brown hue. The final colour you get from henna really does depend on the starting colour of your hair. So if your hair is grey, then if you use the standard greenish powder henna, then it will be more on the red side. Whereas if your hair is black, over time it will grab more of those reddish brown hues, but it will be less vibrant the darker your hair is. And so my tip to you is to avoid black henna, and the reason for that is that black henna straight out of the packet, being marketed as black henna to apply to make your hair black, will probably have some artificial and harmful ingredients in it, and there are some manufacturers who are adding these things in and marketing the final product as black henna. So do avoid those. You've probably seen images of people who have gone to have some black henna dyes or black henna tattoos done, and what that can do, because it contains those artificial ingredients that are harmful to the skin, is it can burn the skin. So do watch out for that. If you want to use henna as part of the process to make your hair darker, then you would start with the henna step and then move on to indigo, but you would do one step then the other. I haven't got direct experience of using indigo because I only do the henna step, but that's the way to use henna if you want to make your hair darker rather than keeping the reddish hue. That's the fourth tip. Right, the fifth tip that I will share with you today is that 5 hours is plenty, and by that I mean 5 hours of leaving the henna once you've mixed it into a paste and applied it to your hair. Leave it on for 5 hours maximum. I've heard examples of people leaving the henna on overnight. I personally wouldn't recommend that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, having a thick, gluggy, wet mixture on your scalp overnight isn't a great thing to do. And the other risk is that because henna is so messy, if it slips out from under the cling film or saran wrap, it's going to go everywhere. It could end up going down your neck and all over your bedding. So there are two strong reasons really for not keeping henna on overnight. So stick with the 5 hours, and that will be plenty for the Lawson dye to release and for that to take into your Sisterlocks. The 6th point I will share with you today is that you should apply your henna as close as possible to your next retightening as possible. The reason for that is, as part of applying henna to your hair, you will do a lot of rinsing, and it's actually better that you've already got that regrowth there, you've applied the henna, rinsed, which will then probably loosen up a little bit more hair, and then soon after that you go for your retightening, rather than to have a fresh retightening and then apply the henna and then, you know, end up after all of that rinsing with sort of fuzzy, not so fresh looking hair. So I would advise to do it, and I certainly do anyway every time I apply henna, is apply it as close to the retightening as possible, say a week or so beforehand. Right, the 7th tip I'll share with you today, 7th and final tip actually, is that if you are going to henna your hairline, and if you're hennaing the rest of your hair as well, including your hairline, I would do the hairline last. There are a couple of reasons for this. Now, the hairline is, generally speaking, the thinnest part of our hair, and it's also on the outside. And when you're applying the henna, that should be the last place that you apply the henna to before you add the cling film or the saran wrap. And because it is out there and it's exposed to the elements more, it's the part that will dry the quickest. So if you were to start applying the henna and then put it on your hairline, then work your way through and do the rest, you may well find that by the time you've got through to the rest of it, that it's already started to dry on your hairline. And the reason why you don't want that is because once the henna dries, the action of the dye stops at that point. And also because once it's dried on those short, delicate hairs, then you don't really want the pulling, and you don't really want all the extra rinsing that you'd have to do just to loosen that dry henna before you could rinse it all out. So I would highly recommend that you apply the henna that is going to go on your hairline at the very end, even if you are blessed with a very thick and luscious hairline. And one other point before I finish today is another reason for applying the henna generously all over is because you want it to penetrate onto the Sisterlocks. Sisterlocks are very small and they comprise very compressed hair, so having enough of that henna there will ensure that it penetrates as much as you like it to, so that you've got better and fuller coverage. So those are the 7 tips that I would share with you to save your Sisterlocks when applying henna. Okay, that's it for today's video. Thank you for liking, subscribing and sharing and commenting on the videos. It's very much appreciated. See you next time.